"We're selling this place as soon as the paperwork is done." I froze. Those words weren't meant for my ears, but they sliced straight through my chest like glass. I was standing in the kitchen doorway of my own vacation home, my sanctuary by the lake, when I heard my daughter-in-law's voice floating in from the patio. Her laughter carried sharp and smug, like she had already won a prize. The prize was my home. I gripped the counter to steady myself. My son, Eric, had begged me just months earlier to let him and his wife, Melissa, stay here. He said money was tight. He said they just needed a fresh start, a chance to get on their feet. And of course, I agreed. I'm his mother. I wanted to help. But sell my home? Without even asking? Without even telling me? My pulse hammered in my ears as I strained to hear every word. Melissa's friends were giggling with her, sipping wine I had stocked, sitting on furniture I had picked with care. "She doesn't even realize it's practically ours already," Melissa whispered, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Eric's handling the paperwork. Once it's through, we'll cash out and move somewhere better. Cash out on my property, on my sacrifice, on my memories." I wanted to burst through the door, confront her right then and there. But something inside me said, "Wait, don't reveal what you know yet." Because if she was bold enough to say this in my home, to her friends, what else was she plotting? The night air smelled of grilled steak and cheap perfume. Their laughter echoed like a cruel chorus while I stood in the shadows, my heart breaking and my blood boiling. And that's when the plan began forming in my mind. I wasn't always this suspicious. I wasn't always this guarded. But life has a way of teaching you that even the people closest to you can twist the knife the deepest. Would you have trusted your own child in my place? Would you have believed his words over your instincts? Because I did, and that's why I didn't see the storm coming. As I crept back to my room that night, I thought of every red flag I had ignored. The rushed wedding, the way Melissa always spoke over me at family dinners, as though my voice didn't matter. The way Eric, my sweet boy, seemed to shrink beside her, like she had him under a spell. But I had told myself it was just my imagination, that I was overprotective, that every mother struggles to let go. Now I knew better. And the worst part was, the betrayal wasn't just from her. It was from him, too. Because if Eric really was handling the paperwork, that meant he wasn't just my son anymore. He was her partner in a scheme against me, against his own mother. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying her words. "We're selling this place." I stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the creak of the old beams, spur of the lake wind against the windows. This house wasn't just wood and stone. It was summers of my children chasing fireflies in the yard, winters of board games by the fire, evenings of my late husband and I sipping wine on the porch, wrapped in blankets, dreaming of retirement here. How could they even think of selling it? By dawn, I knew one thing for sure. If they wanted a war for this house, I was going to fight it. But I had no idea just how dirty the battle was about to get. Would you have confronted her immediately, right there in front of her friends? Or would you have stayed quiet like me, waiting for proof? Either way, my silence that night set off a chain of events I could never have predicted. Because the very next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. And it started with a single phone call. When I picked up the phone that morning, my hands were trembling. I dialed my daughter, Rachel. She answered groggily, her voice soft from sleep. "Mom, it's barely 6. I swallowed hard, forcing my tone steady. "Rachel, I need to see you. Today. It's important." She didn't question me. She never did. Unlike her brother, Rachel had always been the steady one, the one who kept her promises, the one who still called me just to check in, the one who never forgot whose shoulders had carried her through childhood. As I drove into town to meet her at a small diner, my thoughts kept circling back. How had I ended up here, fighting to protect what was mine from my own son and his wife? You should know I wasn't born into comfort. I worked my entire life to build what little I had. I was a nurse for 32 years, night shifts, double shifts, holidays on my feet while others celebrated. My husband, Mark, was a contractor. Together, we pinched every penny, dreaming of the day we could buy a little slice of peace by the lake. That house wasn't luxury. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and it was sacred. When Mark died suddenly from a heart attack 10 years ago, I thought I'd never set foot in that place again. Too many memories. Too much pain. But Rachel convinced me otherwise. Dad built it for you, Mom. Don't let grief steal it away, too. So I kept it. Maintained it. Even when bills got hard, even when I had to patch the roof myself, that house was my last piece of him. And now Melissa wanted to flip it, like it was some meaningless investment. At the diner, Rachel slid into the booth across from me, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. She reached for my hand before I even said a word. "Okay, Mom, tell me everything." So I did. Every last poisonous word I overheard on that patio. Rachel's eyes widened with every sentence. By the time I finished, she was gripping her coffee mug so tight I thought it might shatter. "She actually said that? Selling your house? Eric's helping her?" I nodded, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. Rachel leaned back, exhaling hard. "Unbelievable. She's been circling like a vulture since the wedding, Mom. I told Eric she was trouble." Her words stung, not because she was wrong, but because she was right, and I had refused to listen. Let me tell you something about Melissa. From the moment Eric brought her home, I sensed something off. She was beautiful, yes, too polished, too perfect, the kind of beauty that knew its worth and demanded more. She had a way of making every compliment feel like an insult, every kindness seem like charity. The first Christmas she spent with us, she gave me a bottle of perfume. It was expensive, in a glossy black box. But when I opened it, she smirked and said, "I thought this would be better than the floral stuff you wear. That one smells a little old-fashioned." Everyone laughed awkwardly. I laughed too, because what else could I do? But inside, a seed was planted. And over the years, that seed grew roots. The little comments, the way she tugged Eric away when he lingered too long talking to me. The way she sighed whenever Rachel spoke, as if her opinions were childish. But Eric adored her. He looked at her like she hung the moon. And so I kept my suspicions buried. Until last night. Back at the diner, Rachel's jaw was set, her eyes blazing. "We have to act before she does, Mom. If they're planning something legal, paperwork, you can't wait. You need to protect yourself." I nodded, but fear coiled tight in my stomach. Legal. Paperwork. How far had this gone already? Was Eric really forging documents? Was Melissa coaching him? I stirred my coffee, though I hadn't touched it. "What if it's too late?" I whispered. Rachel shook her head firmly. "It's not. You still hold the deed, right? That's everything. They can't sell what they don't own, unless you give it to them." Her words hit me like a lifeline. Unless I gave it to them. And in that moment, I knew. I would never let Melissa get her claws into that house, not over my dead body. But even as I resolved to fight back, a part of me still ached for Eric. My little boy, the child I rocked to sleep when he had fevers, the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, grinning with missing teeth. How had he become this man, willing to betray me for her? Was it really him, or was it Melissa pulling the strings? Either way, the truth was clear. If I wanted to save my home, I would have to choose between my son and myself. And Rachel wasn't going to let me hesitate. "Mom," she said, leaning forward, lowering her voice, "if you want to stop them, we need to do something drastic. Today." Her eyes were sharp, determined, but what she was about to suggest, I couldn't have imagined it. "Transfer it to me," Rachel said. I blinked. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "Transfer... what?" "The deed, Mom. Put the vacation house in my name. If Eric and Melissa are planning something, they won't see it coming. By the time they try to make their move, it'll already be mine. Safe. Her voice was calm, but I could see the fire behind her eyes. She wasn't asking. She was protecting. The suggestion sat heavy between us. I gripped the edge of the table, my pulse racing. It felt like betrayal, but betrayal against betrayal. Handing my home over to my daughter. Was that the only way to save it? That afternoon, we drove straight to the county office. I barely remember signing the stack of papers, my hands trembling so badly the pen nearly slipped from my fingers. The clerk, a kind woman with tired eyes, didn't ask questions. She just stamped the forms, filed them away, and handed me the confirmation. Just like that, my lake house, my sanctuary, my last piece of mark, wasn't mine anymore. It was Rachel's. I told myself it was safe this way, but the pit in my stomach told another story. That night, when I returned to the house, Melissa and Eric were out on the porch again, glasses of wine in hand. They didn't hear my car pull in, didn't see me standing in the shadows once more. Melissa's laugh rang out, high-pitched and cruel. "I told you, Eric. She won't suspect a thing. She's too soft, too gullible. She'll hand it right over once you ask the right way." Eric's reply was muffled, hesitant, but Melissa's response was sharp, impatient. "Don't go soft on me now. This place is our ticket. Do you want to live like your mother forever, or do you want a real life?" I felt my knees go weak. A real life? My home, my years of sacrifice. That was nothing to her. And my son just sat there, letting her twist the knife. For the first time, the thought crossed my mind like a shadow. Maybe it wasn't just Melissa. Maybe Eric wanted this too. The next morning, I took another step I never thought I would. I hired a security company. They came out, drilled cameras into the corners, installed sleek motion sensors in every room. I told Melissa it was for safety. She rolled her eyes. "Paranoid much?" But I smiled, feigning innocence. Because I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the blinking red light on the new monitor beside me. Every beep felt like a promise. If they tried something, I would know. En ten. It didn't take long. 2 nights later, the motion sensor pinged at 1:47 a.m. My phone buzzed, pulling me from uneasy sleep. I opened the security app with shaky hands. There, on the screen was Eric, my son, sneaking into my study. He opened the drawer where I kept my files, the very place I used to store the deed. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he rifled through the papers. Then Melissa appeared in the frame, her hair loose, her robe trailing behind her like a shadow. She hissed at him, urgency in her voice. "Check again, she must have hidden it." I watched, frozen, as they tore through my things like burglars in the night. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. The next morning, I confronted Eric, not Melissa, Eric. I caught him alone in the kitchen, pouring cereal like nothing had happened. "Looking for something last night?" I asked, my voice low, trembling with rage. The spoon froze in his hand. He turned, his face draining of color. "Mom, don't lie to me." I slammed my hand on the counter, the sound echoing through the room. I saw you. What happened to you, Eric? When did my son become a thief?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. And then Melissa walked in, her smirk sharp as a blade. "Careful," she said coolly. "Accusing your own son of theft? That won't look good, especially if we have to go to court." Court. The word hung in the air like a noose tightening around my neck. My heart shattered right there. Not just because of Melissa's venom, but because Eric didn't defend me. He didn't say, "Mom, stop, it's not what you think." He didn't shield me from her cruelty. He just stood there, silent. And in that silence, I realized I had already lost him. But I hadn't lost everything. Because what they didn't know, what they could never know, was that the house was already beyond their reach. And the footage from those motion sensors? That was going to be my weapon. Would you have confronted him like I did, or would you have kept watching from the shadows, waiting for more proof? Because either way, what came next was darker, uglier, and more dangerous than I could have imagined. And it all began when Melissa made her move. Melissa made her move 3 days later. I was in the living room folding laundry when she strolled in holding a folder, her lips curled into that smug smile I had come to dread. "Eric and I talked," she began, her tone falsely sweet. "We think it's time to put the vacation house on the market. The market's hot, and you'll make more money now than ever. It's the smart thing to do." Her words slithered across the room, poisonous. I forced myself to keep my hands steady as I folded a towel. "I'm not selling," I replied calmly. Her smile twitched, faltered, then sharpened. "It's not just your decision, you know. Eric's your son. He has a say in this house, too." That's when the truth crystallized. Melissa had filled his head with lies. She had convinced him he had some claim, some right to the property. And I realized she wasn't bluffing. She believed she could force me out. That night, Rachel came by. I showed her the footage from the motion sensors, the proof of Eric and Melissa rummaging through my study like burglars. Rachel's jaw clenched, her hands trembling with rage. "Mom, this is enough. You have to get ahead of this before they take it further. They're going to try something legal. I can feel it." She was right. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. A letter from an attorney. Eric and Melissa were claiming intent, that I had promised the house to Eric verbally, that I was withholding what was rightfully his. They were demanding a transfer of ownership. My son had signed his name to it. I sat there at the kitchen table, the letter shaking in my hands, tears blurring the words. It wasn't just Melissa anymore. It was Eric. He had chosen her side. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The betrayal sank into my bones, cold and merciless. I kept asking myself, did I fail him as a mother? Did I raise a man who would take everything I worked for and sell it for scraps? But beneath the sorrow, anger simmered. They thought that they could bully me into submission. They thought they had cornered me. They didn't know I had already transferred the house. And they certainly didn't know I had the footage. The disaster came to a head when they decided to host a family meeting. Melissa invited her parents, Eric's cousins, even some friends. They filled the living room like it was a courtroom, Melissa holding court in the center. She cleared her throat dramatically. "We're here to talk about the future. Eric and I are starting a family, and this house is the best way to secure it. Mom," she turned to me, venom sweetened with fake affection, "we need you to do the right thing. Sign the house over." The room buzzed with whispers. Her parents nodded approvingly as if they were judges at some twisted trial. Rachel sat beside me, silent, her hand gripping mine under the table. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear Melissa's next words. "If you don't, we'll have no choice but to take legal action." Gasps rippled through the room. I looked at Eric, my son, my flesh and blood. His eyes avoided mine. And that was the breaking point. I stood slowly, the room falling into silence. My voice shook, but I forced it to rise above the weight pressing on my chest. "You think you can bully me?" I said, staring straight at Melissa. "You think you can steal from me, from the very hands that raised your husband, fed him, clothed him, gave him everything he has? You want this house so badly? Let me show you something." I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and cast the footage from the motion sensors onto the television. Gasps echoed through the room as Melissa and Eric appeared, sneaking through my study at night, rifling through drawers, whispering about finding the deed. Melissa's face drained of color. Eric's mouth fell open. Rachel leaned forward, her voice like steel. "This is who you're siding with. A woman who made you break into your own mother's things." The room was silent. Every eye turned to Melissa. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. She lifted her chin, her voice shaking but still sharp. So what? A camera doesn't change the law. Eric has a claim. We'll win in court. You can't stop us. And that's when I delivered the blow. I already transferred the deed to Rachel. Melissa's smirk vanished. Eric's face crumpled. Her parents exchanged horrified glances. For a moment, the silence was absolute. Then Melissa hissed, "You'll regret this." And I knew then that the war was only beginning. Would you have exposed the footage in front of everyone or kept it as a secret weapon for court? Because either way, what happened next proved Melissa wasn't going to give up quietly. She was about to escalate in ways I never saw coming. The fallout from that night spread like wildfire. The very next morning, whispers began circling through our small town. My phone rang off the hook. Friends, neighbors, even coworkers from years ago, asking if it was true, asking if Eric and Melissa had really tried to steal my house. Melissa hadn't wasted any time. She spun her story first. Suddenly, I was the villain. She told people I was senile, that I was confused about the deed, that I had unfairly favored Rachel, and was trying to cut Eric out of his inheritance. It stung worse than I can describe. People I'd known for decades gave me wary looks at the grocery store. A neighbor I'd once baked pies with whispered behind her hand as I walked by. Melissa's lies spread like poison, and Eric just stood by her side, nodding, silent, complicit. Then came the letter. Another attorney, this one more aggressive, threatening to take me to court for breach of promise and unfair transfer of assets. I sat at my kitchen table, clutching the paper, my stomach in knots. Court, depositions, public humiliation. Could I handle that? At my age? Rachel was furious when she read it. "They're bluffing, Mom. They can't prove anything. You didn't promise Eric the house, and even if you had, it's yours. It was yours to give to whoever you wanted." But Melissa wasn't playing by rules. She was playing dirty. One evening, I returned home from errands to find the front door wide open. My heart stopped. Inside, drawers were yanked open, papers scattered across the floor. The safe in my study, where I kept family photos, Mark's watch, and a few savings bonds, was pried open, empty. I felt sick. The police came, took statements, dusted for prints, but nothing came of it. I didn't need evidence to know who was behind it. Melissa. The officers shook their heads sympathetically, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought it was just a burglary, just bad luck. But I knew better. Rachel sat with me that night as I stared at the broken lock on the safe. "She's not stopping, Mom," she said quietly. "She's trying to break you, emotionally, financially, any way she can. You need to fight her with more than just security cameras." "What do you mean?" "Get a lawyer, a real one. Someone who'll put her in her place before she destroys you." Her words planted a seed of steel in me. I'd spent weeks feeling like prey, like an old woman waiting for the wolves to tear her apart. But I wasn't weak. Not anymore. The next day, I walked into the office of a local attorney, Mr. Green, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s, with silver hair and a reputation for being ruthless in court. He listened quietly as I told him everything. Melissa's threats, Eric's silence, the motion sensor footage, the burglary. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "They don't have a case," he said flatly. "And if they push, we'll crush them. That footage alone makes your daughter-in-law look like a criminal, not you, but—" He paused, his eyes narrowing. "But what?" I asked. "You need to be prepared. People like her don't quit when they lose ground. They escalate. She'll come after you harder. She'll try to make your life miserable until you give in. The question is, are you ready for that?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "I don't have a choice." He smiled grimly. "Good answer." From that day forward, I wasn't alone. Mr. Green filed responses, drafted restraining notices, and made sure Melissa knew that if she pushed, we'd push back harder. But Melissa wasn't intimidated. Within a week, she showed up at my workplace. Yes, even though I was retired, I still volunteered twice a week at the local clinic. She burst in, loud enough for patients to hear, accusing me of abandoning my son and favoring one child over the other. The humiliation burned hot in my cheeks as nurses tried to usher her out. She clung to the doorframe, shouting that she'd get justice. Would you have let her humiliate you in public, or would you have snapped back? Because I stayed quiet, for that moment. But inside, my fury only grew. The final straw came one evening when Rachel called me, her voice shaking. "Mom, she's been calling my office, leaving voicemails, saying you only transferred the house to me because you're losing your mind. She's trying to get me fired." That was it. Melissa wasn't just after me anymore. She was going after Rachel too. And that's when I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to sit quietly while she tore my life apart. I was going to confront her, head on. And when I did, the entire family would see who Melissa really was. I knew the confrontation had to be public. Melissa thrived in the shadows, whispers, half-truths, manipulations behind closed doors. If I wanted to end her reign of lies, I had to drag everything into the light. So I called a family dinner. Rachel was nervous when I told her. "Mom, are you sure? What if she twists everything again?" "She can only twist what people don't see," I said firmly. "This time they'll see it all." That Saturday, my dining room table was full. Rachel sat beside me, her spine straight, eyes blazing with quiet support. Eric arrived with Melissa clinging to his arm, her smile sugary sweet but her eyes sharp as razors. Behind them came Melissa's parents and two of Eric's cousins. It felt less like a family dinner and more like a trial. Exactly what Melissa wanted. But this time, I was ready. Dinner began in tense silence. I could barely taste the roast chicken on my plate. My hands trembled under the table, but my resolve held steady. Finally, Melissa cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Since we're all here, let's stop pretending. Eric and I deserve a fair share. Rachel shouldn't get everything while he's left with nothing. Don't you all agree?" Murmurs rippled. Eric shifted uncomfortably but didn't contradict her. My heart squeezed, but I pushed the pain down. This wasn't about saving him anymore. It was about saving myself. And Rachel. I stood slowly, the legs of my chair scraping against the floor, all eyes turned to me. "You want fairness?" I asked, my voice trembling but loud. "Then let's be fair. Let's show everyone the truth." I pulled out a small USB drive, plugged it into the TV and pressed play. The footage rolled across the screen. Eric and Melissa, creeping through my study in the dead of night. Melissa hissing. "Check again, she must have hidden it." Eric rummaging through drawers with guilty, trembling hands. Gasps filled the room. Rachel folded her arms, her face like stone. Melissa shot to her feet, her smile gone, her face pale. "That doesn't prove anything. We were just what?" I cut in, my voice rising. "Just breaking into my things? Just trying to steal from me? Is that your idea of fairness?" The room was silent except for the crackle of the video. Eric's cousins exchanged horrified glances. Melissa's parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But Melissa wasn't done. She lifted her chin, her voice trembling with rage. "You think this little stunt makes you a saint. You're manipulative, old, bitter. You gave the house to Rachel because you can't stand that Eric chose me. You've poisoned him against me from the start." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let them show. "No, Melissa," I said, my voice steady now. "You did that yourself. I opened my home to you, I trusted you, and you tried to sell it out from under me. You dragged Eric into lies, into theft. You humiliated me in public, spread rumors, tried to destroy Rachel's career. And for what? A house?" My voice cracked with emotion. "You wanted to strip away everything I built, but what you don't understand is you can't steal love. You can't steal family, and you sure as hell can't steal what's already gone." Her brow furrowed. "Gone?" I took a deep breath. "I already transferred the house. To Rachel. It was never yours to take." The silence that followed was suffocating. Eric's face crumpled, his hands trembling as he finally looked at me. "Mom, you really did that?" His voice was small, broken. "Yes," I said firmly, "but because I had to protect myself, and protect the memory of your father, who worked himself to the bone for that house." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Melissa's mask cracked, her face twisted with fury, her voice shrill. "You'll regret this. All of you. We'll take you to court. But her words were drowned out by Rachel's calm, cutting voice. "Go ahead, try. Every shred of evidence shows you for what you are. The cameras, the letters, the break-in. Do you really think a judge will side with you?" Melissa sputtered, her face red. For the first time, she looked cornered. Eric buried his face in his hands. "Melissa, stop. Just stop." Her eyes snapped to him, wide with shock. "What are you saying?" He looked up, his voice shaking. "I can't do this anymore. You've turned me against my own mother. You made me. I almost—" His voice cracked. "This isn't who I am." The room was silent. Melissa's mouth fell open. For once she had no words, and in that silence I knew I had won. Would you have trusted your son to finally break free from her, or would you have turned your back for good? Because even though Melissa's mask had slipped, I wasn't sure the battle was truly over. But one thing was clear: the climax of this war had left her exposed. And what came next was the resolution I had been waiting for. After that night, everything unraveled for Melissa. Her lies, her manipulations, the mask she wore so carefully, it all crumbled in front of the very people she thought she controlled. Eric moved out of the vacation home within a week. I didn't ask him to. He just came to me one morning, his suitcase by the door, his face hollow. "Mom," he whispered, not meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry for all of it." I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he had chosen her over me, but when I looked at him, my son, my little boy, broken and ashamed, I simply nodded. "Go find yourself again, Eric. Away from her." And he did. Melissa tried to cling to him, but without my house to dangle in front of him, her grip loosened. Within months, she was gone. Divorce papers followed shortly after. It was over. The legal threat stopped too. Mr. Green told me Melissa didn't have a leg to stand on in court, not after the footage, the break-in, the letters. If she tried, she'd only humiliate herself further. And so, the storm finally passed. But it left scars. For weeks, I couldn't walk through my own home without remembering Melissa's laughter on the porch, her venomous whispers, her hands rifling through my drawers. I felt tainted, as if she had infected my sanctuary. That's when Rachel stepped in again. She surprised me with a gift: new curtains, fresh paint for the walls, even a hand-woven rug she found at a local market. "Out with the old energy, Mom," she said, smiling. "This place deserves to breathe again." Together we scrubbed, painted, rearranged, and slowly the house felt like mine again. Or rather, ours. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the lake, Rachel and I sat on the porch sipping iced tea. The air was cool, the water glimmering gold. "You saved us," I told her softly. She shook her head. "No, Mom, you saved yourself. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you are." Her words sank deep into me. For months I had felt like prey, like a fragile woman pushed into corners. But the truth was, I had fought, I had endured, and I had won. Melissa hadn't stolen my dignity, she had sharpened it. And Eric, he's rebuilding. He calls now and then, his voice quieter, humbler. He's trying to piece his life back together. I don't know if trust can ever fully return, but he's still my son. And as a mother, my love for him runs deeper than betrayal. But I'll never be blind again. The lake house is still in Rachel's name, and I'm glad. It's safe there, out of reach from manipulators, liars, and thieves. And one day, when I'm gone, it'll pass to her children, the ones who visit me now, chasing fireflies just like their father and aunt once did. It feels like the house is finally back where it belongs. a legacy of love, not greed. Melissa thought she could strip me of everything, but instead, she reminded me of what I had all along: resilience, family, and the courage to protect what matters. So now I ask you, if someone you love tried to steal the very heart of your life, would you have the strength to fight back? Because I did, and I'll never regret it.